Hi, I'm Dr. Jeffrey Thor Damelin. I'm here to give you a crash course on mitigating risk associated with prone restraint related deaths. As a scientist, I'm going to give you the tools that you need to make the decisions to mitigate risk on the street. Let's talk about respiration. I take a breath in, air fills my lungs, I oxygenate my blood, that blood gets pumped out to my tissues to oxygenate it. That's the simplest part of it. But conversely to that, I breathe out. I'm exhaling carbon dioxide when I exhale. But where's that carbon dioxide coming from and how is it getting to my lungs? Largely it's being generated by my skeletal tissue, right? This CO2 in the tissues, and it now needs to get transported through the same circulatory system to my lungs so that I can exhale it. And that's the system I want to talk about today, because the uploading of oxygen in normal human physiology is greatly biased. And what I mean by that is it's much easier for our body to take in oxygen than it is to offload carbon dioxide. Okay, that's the first lesson. Just normal physiology, it's actually more difficult to offload carbon dioxide. But I've also got to transport that carbon dioxide. And if I restrict breathing in any way, I can also compress large vessels in the torso that restricts the movement of that blood to the lungs in order for me to off-gas it. I'm going to go through several risk factors that will inhibit normal physiology of a person to off-gas CO2, okay? Which leads to increases in concentration of carbon dioxide in the blood. Stay with me. It doesn't get much more complicated than this. But as I increase carbon dioxide in the blood, I inevitably increase H+ ions. As we build up carbon dioxide, we build up H+ ions. If we build up H+ ions, we decrease blood pH, and that's the critical notion here. We start falling down this cascade of decreasing pH until we run into a situation where we increase the risk for cardiac arrhythmia and eventually cardiac arrest. Now, I'm bumping up against my expertise when I start talking about arrhythmias and cardiac arrest. But again, I'm giving you the tools so that you can recognize on the street someone who may be susceptible to metabolic acidosis, and then use these tools as a decision tree at your agency together with your EMS directors, your medical directors, to decide what's right for your agency. So let's talk about the risk factors. The first one that we've recognized is obesity. There's a plethora of reasons why an obese person has more complications in the prone position than a non-obese person. One that I'll get into is simply abdominal adipose tissue, okay? When that person is prone, that adipose tissue compresses the abdomen. What you need to understand is there's an inextricable link between the thorax and the abdomen. So if I compress the abdomen and increase pressure there, I'm automatically increasing pressure in the thorax. If I increase pressure in the thorax, I automatically decrease the compliance, making it more difficult for that person to breathe. This is just simple first principles physics. Let's talk about drugs as our second risk factor. Methamphetamine, fentanyl, cocaine, all of these will tell the body or de-link what the body recognizes and how it reacts to a buildup of carbon dioxide. So you're decoupling, if you will, the buildup of carbon dioxide and how the body reacts to it. That's how drugs help build up carbon dioxide. And again, we build up carbon dioxide, we're decreasing pH, working our way down the metabolic cascade to cardiac arrest. Hard surfaces. What do I mean about this? Again, first principles physics here. If you have a soft surface to put these people on, I would say do it. I'm not asking you to carry another gizmo. I'm not asking you to go out of your way in an emergency situation. But if there is a choice between grass and asphalt, prone them out on the grass. Even 2 millimeters of compliance in that surface that you've now prone them out on increases the compliance of breathing, which makes it easier for them. Anxiety, something that you don't necessarily control. But know that if somebody's life is about to change, if they're running from police, they understand that they've done something wrong. It's a scary, unique situation for them. Anxiety might be high, and anxiety alone carries a risk for arrhythmia. Risk factor number 5, a big one, is simply struggle. If they're resisting against restraints continuously, you could be dealing with a subject at risk for metabolic acidosis and eventual cardiac arrest. And that might be a good time to trigger EMS. Time is our 6th risk factor, and I can tell you that there is no court out there that is preventing you from doing your job, unless it takes an unreasonable amount of time in order to achieve getting that person in restraints. Risk factor number 7, downward force. What do I mean by that? I mean people who are proned out and you have a single loading force in the vertical direction towards the ground on top of their back. And we know from research that that downward force will increase thoracic pressure, which decreases venous return of blood. And remember, we're trying to get that carbon dioxide from the tissues to the lungs so we can exhale it. And if we can't do that, we're decreasing pH on our way down to cardiac arrest. So now, as far as I know, there is no one agency, no expert, no court that currently prevents you from applying downward force. Know that when you do apply downward force, you're restricting that blood flow. And so get that person in restraints and get them up into a more natural breathing position as quickly as you can. Immobilization is when we have several officers that are applying a dynamic force to remove any perceived struggling from the assailant during the takedown and during the restraint process. This is very different from downward force. Downward force is single, non-dynamic. Immobilization is multiple points of downward force that change in direction and magnitude depending on how that person is reacting. Now, it's important that when that's happening to someone, that could increase anxiety, or let's imagine this, that person is having trouble breathing and that spikes their anxiety and might increase the struggle. And if we increase struggle, how might police interpret that? They might interpret that as increased resistance, which might lead to increased immobilization. And so we get this compounding effect of how we deal with these people. Again, no one is preventing you, at least that I know of, from performing downward force or immobilization. What they're asking you to do, and what the science is telling us, it's get them in restraints, sit them up, and do both as fast as you can. So if you found this interesting, please visit us at gtdscientific.com, where you can find more content directly related to this subject.